A galaxy of light and hope was bleeding out in the dark. The Grand Council Chamber, once a cathedral of diplomacy, where starlight streamed through crystalline arches to illuminate the flags of 200 civilizations, now felt like a gilded tomb. 47 of those flags bore black ribbons. 47 species devoured, erased, or shackled by the silent, creeping dread known as the Kretak Horde. The air, usually humming with a symphony of translated debate, was thick with the static of despair and the ozone scent of collective fear. Into this moribund hall walked Ambassador Veltra of the Arxian Coalition, her 4 azure eyes holding the weight of 14 billion ghosts and a single, desperate gamble that could either be salvation or damnation. Like, subscribe, share, and comment below to join us on this journey into the dark heart of the galaxy and the silent saviors waiting beyond. She moved past rows of silent delegates, beings of shimmering energy, scaled warriors, and delicate botanicals, all united by the hollow look of impending extinction. The holographic throne of Council Speaker Mordak pulsed with a weak, anxious light. Ambassador Veltra, his voice boomed, stripped of its usual resonance. You convene us in shadow. Speak your piece. Veltra did not use words first. With a tap on her datapad, she unleashed a silent hollow projection into the chamber's heart. It was not a tactical display. It was a gallery of nightmares. Cities, not bombed, but dissolved into lakes of smoking slag. Vast plains of a once verdant world now churned into mass graves, each pit long enough to swallow mountains. The shrieking silence of a refugee freighter, its life support dead, thousands of faces frozen behind viewports in final crystalline terror. Her voice, when it came, was a bare whisper that cut through the silence like a scalpel. 14 billion confirmed dead. The reality is likely thrice that number. The Kretak do not conquer. They consume. They erase. They are not an army. They are a cosmic pestilence with warships. She advanced, her will the only solid thing in the crumbling room. Our combined fleets have engaged them 17 times. We have won 0. At Proxima Station, our entire 4th Defense Fleet, 200 vessels, 60,000 souls, was reduced to expanding plasma in 20 minutes. They are not stronger. Speakers and councillors. They are beyond us. A murmur, like the last sigh of a dying star, passed through the assembly. Councillor Jark of the Felonian Empire rose, his scales a sickly, stressed indigo. We know the arithmetic of our doom, Ambassador. We have poured our treasuries into warships, shared our most guarded military secrets. The answer is written in our burning skies. They are superior. What would you have us do? Throw rocks at a hurricane? Veltra inhaled, the air burning in her dual respiratory systems. This was the precipice. There is one power we have not petitioned. One potential ally we exiled to the darkness, out of shame and fear 2 centuries ago. The chamber didn't erupt, it imploded. A wave of psychic shock, shouted denials, and angry chitters swept through. Jark's frills stood fully erect, a sign of primal alarm. You speak of the humans? Have the screams of the dying driven you mad, Veltra? They are barbarians, recidivists. The First Contact Massacre is not ancient history. It is a cautionary scar on the soul of the galaxy. The memories, stored in every species' historical database, played behind every delegate's eyes. 200 years prior, the Galactic Council, in its pristine arrogance, had sent an assimilation fleet to a young, vibrant species just venturing beyond its solar cradle. The humans had not bowed. They had not negotiated. With a ferocity that shattered galactic norms, they fought with a terrifying, sacrificial brutality, using primitive nuclear weapons in the void, ramming crippled ships as final acts of defiance. They had not just repelled the fleet. They had broken it, sending the shattered survivors home with a final chilling transmission before sealing their entire system behind an impenetrable quantum barrier. Strong, leave us alone or we will leave you in pieces. End P. They are savages who nearly annihilated themselves before they ever touched the stars, another delegate cried. They are what we forced them to become. Veltra's voice rose, finally a clarion call of desperation. A species that values its freedom above its own survival. And now we face an enemy for whom survival is not enough. They demand total subjugation. She changed the projection. It showed the Sentinel's Gate, the last fortified choke point before the core worlds. Admiral Cross's 300 valiant, disparate ships formed a fragile line against a creeping tide of 2,000 Kretak blights on the sensor map. The mathematics are final. In 72 hours, the gate falls. A week after that, my homeworld, Arxia Prime, is ash. Then yours, and yours, and yours. She looked at each of them, her gaze a physical weight. We have tried diplomacy. We have tried war. We have failed. All that remains is to beg. Beg? From monsters? Jark spat. From the only beings in recorded history, Veltra said, her tone dropping to a deathly calm, who looked a galactic subjugation fleet in the eye and told it to go to hell. We will not ask them to join our club. We will send a distress call, a scream into the dark from civilizations facing extinction. We will show them the graves, the chains, the burning children. We will appeal not to their politics, but to whatever remains of their compassion. And if they ignore us, she spread her hands, a gesture of ultimate surrender. Then we die, knowing we tried everything, even swallowing our boundless pride. Vote that followed was not a dignified process. It was a raw, nerve-shredding exposure of galactic panic. One by one, lights flickered on the master panel. Green for the desperate gamble. Red for proud oblivion. The tally swayed, a heartbeat away from failure. When the final light glowed, a trembling green from the aquatic syrinx, the margin was a mere 8 votes. Speaker Mordak seemed to physically shrink. The measure passes, he announced, the words tasting of ash. Prepare the beacon. May our ancestors forgive us for what we unleash. For 6 hours, the greatest minds of the council crafted their plea. They compiled sensor footage of Kretak atrocities, worlds scoured of life, slave pens overflowing, the cold, methodical butchery of surrender. They embedded tactical data, fleet movements, the brutal, hopeless mathematics of their defeat. And at its core, they placed a simple, raw message. We wronged you. We are sorry. We are dying. Please, help us. The beacon, a concentrated pulse of quantum-entangled data, was fired from the most powerful transmitter ever built. It shot across the void, not as a radio wave, but as a tear in reality itself, programmed to pierce the infamous quantum barrier surrounding the human soul system. Then, there was nothing to do but wait, and watch the Kretak noose tighten. At Sentinel's Gate, Admiral Cross, a Valyrian whose kind knew no word for surrender, studied his tactical holotank with the grim acceptance of a soldier reading his own epitaph. His fleet was a patchwork quilt of galactic defiance, Felonian dartships, Arxian bulwarks, Syrinx hydro-organic cruisers. Brave. Doomed. The Kratak advance fleet has cleared the nebula, Admiral. His young aide, Commander Rhea, reported. Her voice was steady, but her eyes held the hollow look of someone who has seen too many friends become brief flashes on a screen. 72 hours to engagement range. They've transmitted the standard demand: unconditional surrender or total extermination. Cross gave a bitter, grating laugh. The choice between a quick death and a slow one. How generous. He looked at the faces of his bridge crew, each from a different world, each fighting for the same patch of space to call home. We will make our stand here. We will make the darkness pay for every meter. Sir, Rhea said, hesitating, a flash traffic from the council. They have sent the beacon. To the humans. Cross went very still. The humans were a myth, a ghost story used to frighten fledgling cadets. A fool's hope, Rhea. The universe has run out of miracles. Meanwhile, deep within the swirling, violent heart of the advancing Quitak Armada, aboard the planet-killing flagship Endless Suffering, Warlord Thraxel indulged in a moment of serene, cruel satisfaction. He was a monument of chitin and scar tissue, a being whose philosophy was etched into his very exoskeleton. The universe was food, and the strong consumed. His tactical officer, a lesser Kretak with crimson stress markings, delivered the report. The prey huddles at the gate, Warlord. 300 vessels. Sensors detect. Fear. Much fear. Thraxel's mandibles clacked in amusement. 300 against our 2,000. This is not a battle. It is a ritual cleansing. Proceed. Let them savor their final hours. Then we will usher their core worlds into the silent, eternal night. 36 hours passed. The council chamber was a silent tomb, the hope leaching away with each tick of the chrono. No response came from the Sol system. The quantum barrier remained, a silent, mocking wall. Then, at the 37th hour, every long-range sensor in 3 galactic sectors simultaneously flatlined. Not jammed, not blinded. They simply returned nothing. As if a sphere of absolute non-existence had been placed between Sentinel's gate and the human barrier. Panic, of a different, more profound flavor, gripped the council. What sorcery is this? Mordak whispered. On the bridge of the Endless Suffering, Thraxel's irritation spiked. Sensor ghosts. The prey employ pathetic tricks. Then, a transmission arrived. It didn't hail. It didn't request a channel. It manifested on every comms system, from military quantum arrays to civilian entertainment bands. A voice speaking in flawless, accentless galactic standard. It was male, calm, and devoid of any emotion whatsoever. The audio equivalent of absolute zero. Terran Expeditionary Fleet. Distress call acknowledged. Hold position. Do not intervene. We will handle the threat. The message ended. In the echoing silence, space at the edge of the Sentinel's gate system began to convulse. Reality groaned, stretched, and then ripped apart in a silent, violet-hued cataclysm. It was not a hyperspace emergence. It was a violation. And through the tear, they arrived. Admiral Cross's sensors finally rebooted, painting the new contacts. His tactical computer stuttered, recalibrating twice before displaying the data. He counted. Once. Twice. By every god that ever was, Commander Rhea breathed, a hysterical laugh bubbling in her throat. 50. They sent only 50 ships? But the laughter died, strangled by the data streaming in. Each contact was a leviathan, a mountain of alloy and shadow. They were not ships, as the galaxy understood them. They were angular, majestic, and terrible, their hulls sheathed in a non-reflective black that seemed to drink the very starlight around them. The power signatures from their reactors dwarfed those of gas giants. The largest, hanging in the void like a dormant god, bore a name etched along its flank in script that seemed to bleed darkness. Strong, TNS Resolve. In the council chamber, the holographic feed showed the new arrivals. Ambassador Veltra felt her secondary heart skip. The gamble had been answered. But as she looked upon those silent, monstrous forms, a new, chilling question echoed in her soul. What have we just awakened? Flicker, Warlord Fraxel felt a flicker of unease, quickly smothered by volcanic rage. 50 ships. They insult us. They believe size alone will grant them victory. We have cracked worlds larger. He turned to his fleet, his command a psychic roar across their neural link. All vessels! The humans wish to die alongside their inferiors. Oblige them. Full attack formation. Leave nothing but atoms. 2,000 Kretak warships. A swarm of predatory shapes and glowing weapon ports surged forward like a tidal wave of claws and teeth. The void between the fleets, filled with the silent, beautiful horror of charging energy weapons, a constellation of death lighting the dark. The 50 human dreadnoughts did not move. They did not raise shields. They simply waited. Then, 1 second before impact, space around each human vessel twisted. A shimmering, honeycombed field of distorted physics flickered into existence. The Kretak barrage, enough firepower to scorch up a solar system, struck this barrier and was not deflected. It was not absorbed. It was erased, its energy vanishing into whatever impossible science the humans commanded. The silence that followed was louder than any explosion. On the bridge of the TNS Resolve, Fleet Admiral Jansen watched the light show dissipate against his fleet's void shields. He was an old man, his face a map of quiet sorrow and unbreakable resolve. Shields at 98%, reported Lieutenant Park, her voice clinical. Enemy weapons ineffective. No impact. Jansen nodded slowly. He had seen the beacon's content. He had watched the footage of the graves, the slavery, the genocide. The cold, methodical fury that had built in him for weeks now had a target. He opened a fleet-wide channel. His voice, the same calm, terrible instrument that had hailed the galaxy. Kretak Horde. This is Fleet Admiral Jansen of the Terran Navy. You were warned 2 centuries ago that aggression would be met with extinction. You did not listen. You have consumed innocent civilizations. You have murdered 14 billion souls. Your reign of butchery ends today. He paused, letting the words hang in the silent void. Then he spoke the 2 words that would echo through galactic history. What happened next was not a battle. It was a declaration. The 50 human leviathans moved with a synchronicity that mocked physics. For vessels of their impossible mass, they accelerated, not with ponderous thrust, but with the terrifying grace of striking serpents. Their formation fluidly shifted from a defensive sphere into a vast, three-dimensional kill zone web, each dreadnought covering its siblings, creating overlapping fields of fire that turned the surrounding space into a perfect geometric cage. The first human weapons to speak were the spinal-mounted rail cannons. There was no brilliant beam of light, no roar of expelled plasma, only a subtle, localized warping of space-time along the Resolve's main axis, as if the universe itself winced. Then, 100 Corvan-class Kretak heavy cruisers, the pride of Thraxl's front line, simultaneously ceased to exist. They did not explode. One moment they were formidable warships, the next they were rapidly expanding clouds of superheated particulate. The projectiles, invisible tungsten spears accelerated to a measurable fraction of light speed, had arrived before the light of their firing. They passed through shields and armor alike as if they were illusions, converting solid matter into vaporized memory. On the bridge of the endless suffering, Warlord Thraxl stared at his tactical display as a quarter of his frontline icons dissolved into static. The sensory feed from the destroyed ships, a final microsecond of atomic unraveling, flooded the command neural link with a burst of pure, shrieking agony that made his lesser officers clutch their heads. "Return fire! All ships concentrate on the leader!" he roared, his psychic command laced with a primal fear he had never known. The remaining Kretak fleet, 1,700 strong, obeyed. A storm of green plasma bolts, psychic disruptor waves, and swarms of intelligent biomissiles converged on the TNS Resolve. The space around the human flagship became a miniature supernova of directed hatred. The human void shields flared again, a kaleidoscope of absorbed energy turning deadly force into harmless, radiant light. When the barrage ceased, the Resolve hung, untouched, its dark hull not even scorched. Then, the rest of the human fleet joined the chorus. From the TNS Vanguard, lances of cobalt energy, not plasma, but coherent streams of contained singularities, lanced out. Where they touched Kretak vessels, gravity itself went mad. Ships were spaghettified, stretched into molten strings of alloy, before being crushed into miniature black holes that blinked out of existence. The TNS Retribution unleashed its swarm, not fighter craft, but clouds of autonomous hunter drones, each no larger than a ground car. They moved like intelligent metallic smoke, flowing around point defense fire, adhering to hulls, and performing surgical, horrific dissection. They would sever weapon clusters, breach reactor coolant lines, and carve open hangar bays to the vacuum, leaving ships bleeding atmosphere and hope. Dead, but not yet destroyed. Admiral Cross watched from Sentinel's gate, his Valyrian blood running cold. His crew was silent, the earlier hope now frozen into awe-stricken terror. "They are dismantling them," Commander Rhea whispered, her voice hollow. "Not fighting, dismantling. Like mechanics taking apart a faulty engine." Cross could only nod. The humans fought with a chilling, machinic precision. There was no rage in their movements, no triumphant surges. It was a systematic, recursive process. Identify threat. Apply overwhelming force. Eliminate. Repeat. In 10 minutes, the Kretak fleet had lost 500 ships. In 20, over 1,000. A mighty horde, the unstoppable tide, was being boiled away into stellar mist. In the council chamber, the silence was absolute. The holographic display showed the real-time slaughter. Councillor Jark's scales were a pale, ghostly white. This is not salvation, he stammered. This is a holocaust. Ambassador Veltra could not tear her 4 eyes away. She had asked for a savior. She was witnessing an exterminator. They are doing exactly what we asked, she said, her voice trembling with the strain of conviction. They are eliminating the threat. At what cost? At what style? Jark shot back. They are toying with them. Those drones, they're leaving ships crippled, alive in the dark to suffocate. What kind of beings wage war like this? The kind who win, Veltra said, the truth of it a cold stone in her stomach. On the Resolve, Admiral Jansen monitored the tactical feed with the detached focus of a master sculptor. Lieutenant Park called out data. Enemy fleet strength at 41%. Their coordination is breaking down. They're attempting to scatter. Activate the quantum interdiction field, Jansen said. His tone, still that of a man, ordering a routine diagnostic. No one leaves. Across the battlefield, space itself seemed to thicken, to congeal. Kretak ships, attempting to spin up their hyperdrives, found the fundamental equations of faster-than-light travel no longer functioned. Space was no longer a medium they could fold. It had become a solid, inescapable wall. Panic, true and absolute, now spread through the Kretak neural link. It was no longer a signal of aggression, but a raw frequency of animal terror. Warlord Thraxel felt his empire crumbling in real time. He saw a drone swarm envelop a battleship that had served him for decades, stripping it to its girders in moments. He saw a human dreadnought take a direct hit from a dozen plasma lances and not even change course. The calculus of power he had built his life upon had been rendered invalid. Open a channel to the human command ship. All frequencies. The channel hissed open. Thraxel's voice, once the boom of a conqueror, was now stripped raw. Human Admiral, it is Warlord Thraxel. We sue for parley. We surrender. Cease fire. The response came after a deliberate, agonizing pause. Jansen's face appeared on Thraxel's screen, his eyes like chips of glacial ice. Warlord Thraxel, your surrender is noted. A sliver of hope, vile and desperate, sparked in Thraxel's psyche. Then Jansen extinguished it, and rejected. You showed no mercy to the 14 billion. You will receive none. You are not soldiers to be granted terms. You are a contagion to be purged. We can make amends, Thraxel screamed, the psychic force of it shaking his bridge. Technology, territory, slaves, name your price. Justice, Jansen said, the word final and absolute. The price is justice. The channel cut. Thraxel slumped in his command throne. The neural link was a cacophony of dying screams and psychic static from his perishing fleet. He was not just being defeated. He was being unmade, his legacy erased from the cosmos with clinical indifference. He gave the only order left. All ships, ramming speed. Take one of them with us. Die with honor. A wave of Kretak vessels, those with engines still functioning, turned and burned toward the human fleet in a final, desperate suicide charge. Admiral Jansen watched the tactic unfold on his display. Predictable, he murmured. Lieutenant Park, Activate the Gorgon protocols. Across the human fleet, a new type of weapon system hummed to life. Point defense arrays, previously silently swatting aside missiles, now glowed with a malevolent purple light. As the Kretak ships entered final range, these arrays fired not projectiles, but waves of focused temporal distortion. The charging ships didn't explode. They slowed. Relative time around them stretched, dilated, then snapped. To outside observers, the vessels seemed to accelerate to impossible speeds for a fraction of a second, before violently decelerating to a dead stop, their inertial forces unrestrained by their own shields. The result was not an explosion, but a silent, grotesque compression. Ships crumpled inward like discarded foil, every atom forced into its neighbor. The suicide charge ended not in glorious fire, but in a drifting field of compacted, unrecognizable scrap. The battle, if it could ever have been called that, concluded 6 hours after it began. The last Kretak signature, a damaged frigate trying to hide in the sensor shadow of a gas giant, was pinpointed by a hunter drone swarm and dissected. Silence returned to the space around Sentinel's Gate. Not the silence of peace, but the deafening, absolute silence of a vacuum freshly scoured of life. 2,000 Kretak warships. Gone. Not a single survivor. Not a single escape pod was spared. The human fleet regrouped, their formations perfect, their hulls unmarred. The only evidence of the cataclysm was the faint, expanding debris field that glittered in the distant starlight like cosmic confetti. So, a new transmission arrived for Admiral Cross. Sentinel's Gate is secure. Kretak fleet neutralized. Maintain position. Terran Expeditionary Fleet is proceeding to liberate occupied systems. Proceed? Cross looked at the message, then at the serene, monstrous human vessels. They had just annihilated the most powerful military force in the galaxy. And they considered it a first step. The human fleet did not linger. Their drives engaged, not with the violent tear of their arrival, but with a smooth, silent folding of space. In a blink, they were gone, heading coreward toward the first of the 47 enslaved systems. The news and the sensor logs spread through the council at the speed of despair. The celebrations were muted, tinged with a pervasive, species-deep dread. They had been saved by a force of nature that viewed the mighty Kretak horde as a minor infestation. Ambassador Veltra found herself the reluctant oracle of this new age. In closed sessions, she was grilled. What are their goals? Will they turn on us? Can we control them? Her answer was always the same, drawn from the cold, precise words of Admiral Jansen and the even colder precision of his weapons. We cannot control a hurricane. We can only hope to survive it and be grateful it blew in the direction of our enemies. The human campaign was not a war of liberation. It was a surgical scourging. They arrived at each occupied system without warning. Their tactics adapted seamlessly. For hardened military bases on barren moons, they used the Stellar Lance, a weapon from the TNS Resolve that fired a beam of focused stellar core energy, piercing through planetary crusts to vaporize bunkers buried miles deep, often triggering catastrophic geological events that rendered the world uninhabitable for centuries. For orbital facilities, the hunter drones swarmed, a silent, consuming plague of metal and laser cutters. For fleet anchorages, the relativistic rail cannons spoke again, leaving behind only expanding rings of atomic dust. They asked for no surrenders. They offered no terms. They identified military targets and eradicated them with a completeness that was both breathtaking and soul-chilling. Kretak forces, hearing of the fate of the main fleet, often broke before the humans even arrived. Some commanders chose self-destruction over facing the silent dreadnoughts. None who fought survived. Yet amidst this terrifying efficiency, another pattern emerged. A glimmer of something else. When the humans arrived at the Helix Nebula, intelligence indicated a massive slave labor camp. Millions of beings from a dozen species imprisoned to mine radioactive minerals. The Kretak guards, hoping for leverage, intermingled their defenses with the prisoner habitats. Admiral Jansen's orders for that engagement were different. They were recorded and later studied in every military academy in the galaxy. Priority Alpha, 0 civilian casualties. Surgical precision only. Drones are to use discriminative targeting. If a Kretak soldier uses a prisoner as a shield, you isolate and disable the soldier without harming the prisoner. You have the technology. Now execute the morality. The assault on the Helix Nebula camp was a masterpiece of restrained power. Hunter drones moved with pinpoint accuracy, disabling guard towers with micro-explosives, severing power to weapon emplacements, and using nanofilament nets to immobilize Kretak troops without damaging the fragile prisoner structures. Not a single slave was harmed. When the last guard fell, human shuttles descended, not carrying soldiers, but medical teams and humanitarian aid, food, water, medicine, delivered by silent, helpful service drones. A freed Syrinx elder. His water-breathing suit, patched and failing, was recorded looking up at the TNS Resolve looming in the sky. He spoke to a human medic, his words translated. You kill with one hand and heal with the other. Which is your true face? The human medic, a young woman, finished sealing the elder's suit and met his gaze. "Ma'am," she said softly, "the face that looks at you is the only one that matters right now. This incident, more than any battle, reshaped the galactic narrative." The humans were not mindless monsters. They were precision. They were a scalpel that could dissect a cancer or perform a life-saving operation with the same steady hand. The difference was not in the tool, but in the target. Week after week, system after system fell. The Kretak Millennium, as their propaganda had called it, was being undone in a matter of months. On Kretak Prime, the ruling Supreme Matriarch watched the reports with a growing, cold horror that had replaced her imperial arrogance. Her generals spoke not of strategy, but of inevitable doom. "We cannot fight them," General Kraft stated flatly, his kitten dull with stress marks. "They are not an enemy. They are a natural disaster with targeting computers. Our ships are insects to them. Our weapons are raindrops on mountains." "Then what do you propose?" the matriarch hissed, the air in the throne room stale with fear. Kraft was silent for a long moment. "We have observed one inconsistency. At the slave camps, they showed restraint. They protected the non-combatants. It is the only leverage we have. We must surrender. Completely. Unconditionally. We must throw ourselves on whatever shred of mercy their bizarre morality might allow." It was the ultimate humiliation for a species built on dominance. But the alternative was species-wide annihilation. The matriarch gave the order. A high priority, open channel transmission was broadcast toward the last known location of the human fleet. Strong, to the Terran Expeditionary Fleet. This is the Supreme Matriarch of the Kretak Horde. We hereby surrender unconditionally. We beg for terms. We will accept any condition to spare our civilian populations. We await your response. The message reached the TNS Resolve as it oversaw the dismantling of a final shipyard in the core system. Admiral Jansen read it in his ready room. He then summoned his senior captains via hologram. They've surrendered, he stated simply. Captain Varus of the TNS Vanguard frowned. A trick, sir. They've broken every agreement they've ever made. Irrelevant, Jansen said. The question is not their intent. It is our response. We have achieved our primary objective, the neutralization of their offensive military capacity. Their industrial base is 93% destroyed. The threat of galactic conquest is over. So we accept? Asked Captain Elise Chen of the TNS Retribution. Jansen steepled his fingers. We do not accept surrender from a force that uses the word as a tactical pause. We enforce a permanent peace. Here are my terms, which you will relay to the matriarch. 1. Complete, verifiable disarmament. Every warship, every weapon, decommissioned under our supervision. 2. The Kretak species is restricted to their home star system. No interstellar travel for 200 standard years. 3. Permanent Terran monitoring stations in orbit around Kretak Prime. 4. Reparations to be determined by the Galactic Council, paid to every victim species for the next 10 generations. The terms were devastating. They would reduce a star-faring empire to a single, quarantined planet. They were also, implicitly, an offer of survival. And if they refuse, sir? Chen asked. Jansen's eyes hardened. Then we finish what we started, and we do not stop at their military. We will make Kretak Prime a monument, a dead world to remind the galaxy for all time of the cost of genocidal ambition. The choice is theirs. The terms were transmitted. On Kretak Prime, the matriarch read them and wept acidic tears of relief and shame. They were ruinous. They were also a lifeline. She accepted immediately. The human fleet, now reduced to 45 dreadnoughts. 5 would remain behind as permanent guardians, arrived at Kretak Prime. They did not bombard. They did not threaten. They deployed legions of engineering drones and oversight AIs. For 3 weeks, they supervised as the broken remnants of the Kretak war machine were systematically torn apart. Battle cruisers were fed into molecular recyclers. Weapon factories were sealed and buried. It was not a victory parade. It was a funeral for an empire, conducted by silent, efficient pallbearers of alloy and code. With the Kretak pacified and quarantined, Admiral Jansen prepared for the final act. The galaxy had been saved. Now, humanity had to define what came next. He sent one last, formal transmission to the Galactic Council, inviting Ambassador Veltra and Speaker Mordak to a secure conference. As the call was prepared, Jansen stood at the observation deck of the Resolve, looking down at the blue-green marble of Kretak Prime. The 5 Guardian dreadnoughts, now designated the Watchful Sentinels, took up their eternal geosynchronous positions, their weapon ports dark but ever-present. Lieutenant Park approached. The link to the Council is ready, Admiral. Jansen took a final breath of the recycled, sterile air. The war was over. The harder task, defining the peace, was about to begin. He had saved the galaxy from monsters. Now he had to convince them that the saviors, forged in their own violent history and wielding weapons of apocalyptic power, were not monsters themselves. He turned from the view of a conquered world, his face set in lines of weary resolve. It was time to speak to the children he had just pulled from the fire and explain the nature of the firemen. The transmission connected not to the public council chamber, but to a secure, vault-like sanctum deep within the Grand Nexus. Ambassador Veltra and a visibly aged speaker Mordak appeared as holograms, their forms shimmering with a tension that was part gratitude, part profound trepidation. Behind them, the symbols of 100 civilizations seemed to watch, waiting. Fleet Admiral Jansen, Mordak began, his voice carefully modulated. The Galactic Council offers its formal and deepest gratitude. You have done what we could not. Billions are free because of your intervention. Jansen gave a slight, acknowledging nod. We answered a call for help, Speaker. The debt is not to us, but to those who suffered. Our task, however, is incomplete. A threat removed leaves a vacuum. We must discuss what fills it. Veltra leaned forward, her 4 eyes intent. The Council is prepared to offer humanity a permanent seat, full membership, a partnership in guiding the galaxy forward. We decline, Jansen said. The refusal delivered not with hostility, but with the finality of a natural law. The silence stretched. Mordak's crystalline form flickered with confused amber light. Decline? Admiral, you have earned a place at the table of galactic powers. Your technology, your strength, are precisely why we must refuse, Jansen interjected calmly. You operate a system of diplomacy and consensus, built on the idea that all members are relatively equal. Humanity is not equal. We are an outlier. Inserting us into your delicate balance would not stabilize it. It would shatter it. Every debate, every vote, would be conducted under the unspoken shadow of our fleet. That is not partnership. That is hegemony by default, and we want no part of it. Veltra felt a chill. He was articulating her own deepest unspoken fear. Then what do you propose? You will simply return to your isolation, as if this never happened. Not entirely, Jansen said. He manipulated a console, and a draft document appeared in the shared holographic space. This is a proposed treaty. The Terran Galactic Mutual Defense Accord. Its terms are simple. 1. Humanity returns to its sovereign space behind the Soul Barrier. 2. The Galactic Council retains full autonomy over all its internal affairs. We will not intervene, mediate, or participate. 3. He paused, ensuring the next words landed with their full weight. In the event of an existential, species-level threat appear to the Kretak Horde, the Council may invoke the Accord. Upon invocation, a Terran expeditionary fleet will respond. It will have total and unquestioned military authority for the duration of the crisis. It will eliminate the threat by whatever means we deem most efficient and final. Once the threat is neutralized, we will depart. No occupation. No political demands. No territory claimed. Mordak stared at the document, his mind reeling. You wish to be our weapon. A sword we keep sheathed, to be drawn only in the most dire extremity. We wish to be a safeguard, Jansen corrected. A firebreak. Your civilization is a beautiful, diverse garden. But the universe is a wild forest, and sometimes blights emerge that gardeners cannot handle. We are the wildfire you can choose to unleash, to scorch the blight away before it consumes the garden. It is not a role we relish, it is a duty we accept. And the price for this, insurance? Veltra asked. Your understanding, Jansen said, his gaze locking with hers through the light years. And your restraint. You must never call us for trivial matters, for border skirmishes, for political advantage. The accord is for extinction events only. The moment you abuse it, the treaty is void. And we will seal our barrier forever. You must also publicly accept the consequences of our methods. If you call us, you accept that we will not fight a gentleman's war. We will wage total war. There will be no negotiated settlements with genocidal empires. There will only be victory or annihilation for the threat. The galaxy must understand this, or the treaty is meaningless. The proposal was staggering in its arrogance and its humility. It granted the Council no control over humanity, yet made them responsible for humanity's deployment. It offered ultimate protection while demanding ultimate trust. The Council will never agree to such open-ended terms, Mordak said. But his voice lacked conviction. He had seen the alternative. Then we depart now, Jansen said, his hand hovering near a disconnect control. The 5 Sentinels will remain to ensure the Kretak compliance. The rest of us will return to Sol. You will have our gratitude for your struggle, and our silence thereafter. The choice is yours. Wait, Veltra said, the word escaping before she could stop it. She looked at Mordak, then back at Jansen. We need time to debate, to process what you are asking us to become. You have 72 hours, Jansen said. The fleet's jump coordinates for Sol are already plotted. The transmission ended, leaving Veltra and Mordak in the humming silence of the secure room. The council debate that followed was the most fractious in 10 millennia. It was not a debate about policy, but about identity, about fear, about the very soul of galactic civilization. Councillor Jark led the opposition, his scales flushed with angry crimson. This is not a treaty. It is a surrender of our moral authority. We are agreeing that when things become difficult, we will outsource our conscience to butchers. We saw how they fight. It was clean. And that is what is most horrifying. Where is the passion, the struggle, the cost? They turned genocide into an engineering problem. Other voices joined, echoing the fear. They will become the arbiters of what an existential threat is. This makes us permanently children, reliant on a terrifying parent. What if they decide we are the threat one day? Veltra, now the reluctant architect of this new reality, stood to answer. For days she had not slept, wrestling with the same fears. But she had also visited the liberated camps, seen the children who now had a future. You speak of morality, she said, her voice quiet but carrying to every corner. What is the morality of allowing the Kretak to continue? Was it moral to watch, diplomacy after failed diplomacy, as they consumed 47 species? Our morality was a luxury paid for with the blood of billions. The humans have a different moral calculus. They believe the highest morality is to prevent atrocity, absolutely and finally, even if the methods are distressing. She activated a recording from the Helix Nebula, showing the human medics tending to freed slaves. They are not butchers, they are surgeons. And yes, surgery is frightening, it is invasive, it leaves scars, but it saves lives. She turned to the assembled representatives, her gaze sweeping over them. They are offering us a choice. We can remain the gardeners, tending our peaceful plots, singing our songs of harmony. And we can do so with the knowledge that if a wildfire ever comes again, we have a way to stop it. Not to negotiate with it, to stop it. Or we can refuse. We can cling to our unsullied principles and pray that the next Kretak horde is kinder, or that we miraculously become stronger before they arrive. She let the choice hang in the air. I know what my people, who have lost half their number, would choose. They would choose the scar over the grave, every time. The vote, when it came, was closer than the one to send the beacon, but the outcome was clear. The memory of incineration was fresher than the fear of the firebreak. The Terran Galactic Mutual Defense Accord was ratified. The signing ceremony was held in orbit around the Nexus, aboard a neutral station. Admiral Jansen attended via hologram, a silent, grey-haired ghost. Ambassador Veltra signed for the Council. No celebrations followed. It was a somber, weighty transaction, like signing a pact with a powerful and unpredictable force of nature. As the digital seals finalized, Jansen spoke one last time. Remember the terms, Ambassador. Use this wisely. We will be waiting. The hologram faded. Within the hour, the 45 dreadnoughts of the expeditionary fleet folded space and vanished, heading home. The quantum barrier around Sol opened, swallowed them, and sealed shut, as impassable as ever. The galaxy was left to its peace. In the years that followed, a new epoch began, the Pax Terrana, though few said the name aloud. It was an age of profound, paradoxical security. Trade flourished as never before. Cultural exchanges between once wary species blossomed. The Council, humbled and sobered, reformed its defense protocols, focusing on early warning systems and rapid response fleets for small-scale conflicts. Knowing the big threats were now covered by a distant, silent guarantor. But beneath the vibrant surface, a subtle current ran. Every strategic calculation, every act of political brinkmanship was now measured against a single, unspoken question. Is this enough to invoke the Accord? It became the ultimate deterrent. Warlike species tempered their ambitions, not out of fear of the Council's fleet, but out of terror of what that fleet might call forth from beyond the barrier. The 5 sentinels above Kretak Prime became a galactic monument. Pilgrims, scholars, and sometimes just the morbidly curious would travel to nearby systems to observe them through telescopes. 5 dark, motionless sentinels against the swirl of the planet's clouds. They were a reminder of the cost of hubris, of the price of genocide, and of the quiet, terrible power that now watched over all. Ambassador Veltra became the Council's chief liaison to the Terran question, a role she accepted with solemn duty. She buried herself in the study of human history, devouring what fragmented records existed from before first contact. She learned of their ancient wars, their self-inflicted near-destructions, their philosophical struggles with power and violence. She began to understand Jansen's refusal, not as arrogance, but as a profound, hard-won wisdom. Humanity had looked into the abyss of its own soul and seen the monster there. The barrier, the treaty, the restraint, it was all a cage they had built for that monster, a cage with one very specific door. One evening, 3 standard years after the signing. A personal, Priority 1 quantum transmission, encrypted with Terran codes, arrived in Veltra's private quarters. Her hearts hammered as she accepted it. Admiral Jansen's hologram resolved. He looked older, the lines on his face deeper, but his eyes were the same. Ambassador, I trust this finds you well. Admiral, this is unexpected. Has a threat been detected? She was already mentally accessing crisis protocols. No, nothing like that. This is an unofficial communication, a clarification, and perhaps a confession. He gestured, and a starfield appeared between them. For 200 years, we lived behind our wall. The official story, the one your historians believe, is that we isolated out of anger or pride or fear of you. That is only a partial truth. The full truth is we isolated out of fear of ourselves. He told her then what no council record contained: the internal debates after the First Contact massacre, the factions that had wanted to burn a path to the Nexus in revenge. The deeper, more terrifying faction that had looked at the ferocity of their own defense, the cold efficiency with which they had turned tools of exploration into instruments of annihilation, and had seen a reflection they did not like. We realized, Jansen said, his voice low, that the universe already had plenty of species who were clever or wise or peaceful. What it lacked, and what we could become if we failed to master ourselves, was a species that was good at war. Truly, fundamentally good at it. Not brave, not heroic, efficient. We had a talent for it, forged in the crucible of our own violent history. So we made a choice. We would hone that talent to an impossible edge. We would become the ultimate weapon, and then we would sheath it. We would only unsheath it when the alternative was the victory of something like the Kretak. The barrier isn't to keep you out, Ambassador. It's to keep us in. The treaty isn't just your safeguard. It's our leash. Veltra was speechless, the revelation rearranging her entire understanding of the past decade. The fleet you saw, Jansen continued, represented about 1/3 of our total military capacity. We brought only what was needed to achieve the objective with minimal risk to our personnel. We have more, much more. I tell you this not to frighten you, but so you understand the weight of the trust we are placing in you. And, in this treaty, you hold the leash. Do not pull it lightly. But when you must pull it with certainty, and do not flinch but what you unleash. We will not. The transmission ended, leaving Veltra alone with the echoing silence and a terrible, awesome responsibility. She now held a truth too dangerous for the full council. Humanity was not just a powerful neighbor. They were a conscious, self-aware volcano. And the accord was the seismic trigger they had willingly handed her people. Time flowed. A generation grew up knowing of humans only as a legend. A deus ex machina from a dark time. The raw terror faded into a kind of reverent, distant awe. The liberated species thrived. The Kretak, monitored and quarantined, turned their brutal energies inward, beginning a long, painful cultural reckoning with their own history under the silent gaze of the Sentinels. Admiral Cross, retired, wrote a treatise on human military doctrine that became required reading at every war college. It concluded with a simple line: do not seek to emulate them. Seek to understand them enough to never give them a reason to come again. Ambassador Veltra, nearing the end of her career, stood once more in the public council chamber. It was a day of celebration, the anniversary of the liberation of the Helix Nebula camps. A young Syrinx poet, born after the liberation, read a piece dedicated to the silent saviors. It spoke not of fear, but of gratitude for the quiet shadow that lets the light shine. Afterward, a young Felonian aide, born after the war, approached her. Ambassador Veltra, do you think we'll ever meet them? The humans, I mean, not as rescuers, but as friends? Veltra looked at the young face, unmarked by the shared trauma of her generation. She thought of Jansen's weary eyes, of the self-imposed cage, of the monstrous strength kept in check by a conscious daily choice. I hope so, she said softly, placing a gentle hand on the aide's shoulder. But not yet. They are not ready, and perhaps we are not ready for them. For now, it is enough to know they are there, that in the darkest hour, the quietest ones in the galaxy are also the most dangerous, and that they chose to be dangerous for us, not to us. Us. That is the foundation our peace is built upon. A foundation of terrible, beautiful restraint. She walked to the great crystalline window, looking out at the bustling starfield of the Nexus. Ships from 100 worlds docked and departed. Lives were lived. The galaxy, wounded and healed, turned on. Far away in a silent dark room aboard a station orbiting Earth, Admiral Jansen watched the same stars on a screen. A status report glowed beside the image. Strong. Accord status, active. Sentinel network, nominal. Strategic deterrent, primed. All systems at peace. He allowed himself a small, tired smile. The monster was back in its cage. The garden was safe. The firebreak held. It was not the peace they had dreamed of in their youth. It was a harder, more realistic peace, bought with the knowledge of a terrifying capability and the wisdom not to use it. But it was peace, nonetheless. And for a species that had once nearly burned its own cradle and had now used that same fire to save a galaxy, that was enough.